Everybody, welcome to Tech Talks by Gaurav Sharma. Today we're going to talk about a cybersecurity framework called Cyber Kill Chain Framework. This framework was originally introduced by the company, aerospace and defense company Lockheed Martin, and where essentially it has categorized an attack into different phases. So, as cybersecurity professionals, to protect, we need to start thinking like an attacker. Like when an attack happens, what are the phases that an attacker takes or follows to get into our environment, right? So let's look at these different phases. Like the first phase of this framework is reconnaissance. This is where an attacker tries to gain information about your environment, like email, conference information, and all that stuff. Or it's just like to look for like vulnerabilities in your environment. The next phase is weaponization, where it couples that vulnerability into a deliverable payload. The third phase is called delivery. Once it couples that phase, once it couples that vulnerability into a payload, it delivers it in form of a USB, email, web, or whatever, right? Once that payload gets delivered in your environment or like in your victim's computer, the next phase comes as exploitation. That's where you're exploiting that vulnerability to try to install malware into the victim's computer, which is essentially our next phase called installation, where exactly this happens, where you're installing the malware into the computer. Once the malware gets installed in your environment or a victim's computer, that's when it moves on to next phase, which is command and control, where essentially your computer is now connected to an external server that is controlling your computer. And final phase is the actions on objective, and this is where what are you trying to do when you attack an environment, right? Are you trying to do data exfiltration or ransomware or whatever your nasty motive is there, right? So now that we understand how an attacker attacks in our environment, we as a cybersecurity professionals, we need to kill this chain, rightly so, right? That's the name of the whole model, right? Because if this chain is not completed, the attack is not going to be successful, right? So we have to look at each of these phases and try to control that attack or contain it so that it's idle world, nothing would come in, right? At the reconnaissance level, everything, nothing would be able to get in because we don't have any vulnerabilities in our environment. But we know that's not true. There is always going to be a computer that's not patched or whatever, right? So there's always going to be that factor. So we have to make sure that while we do all these basic hygiene of patching all our computers and everything, we also want to make sure that if it comes into our environment, if something gets downloaded or transferred to our environment to a victim's computer, how do we make sure that minimum it has minimum impact on rest of the environment? We're able to contain it right away, right? So, and that's where a lot of things come into play, right? Email, right? Email still is a biggest factor in which that attackers utilize to transfer the payload into our environment, or email security and endpoint security plays a big role. Identity plays a big role here. So like we have to look at all these phases and understand how do we make sure that we are able to protect our environment in every phase of an attack to essentially kill the chain, right? To learn more about this and how Cisco can help you kill this chain of an attack, please reach out to your accounts team and they'll hook you up. Thank you.